All right, folks, shalom and welcome to the Yishai Fleisher Show, broadcasting live from Judea to the world. You're a part of it wherever you are, and thank God Almighty for the opportunity to broadcast with you. And I'm joined by my beloved one and only hostess with the mostest, Malka Fleisher.
Hello.
Shalom and welcome.
Happy summer.
Happy summer to you, Malka. I got to tell you, so much stuff going on that I almost forgot to do the show this week.
Wow.
Even though I recorded yesterday at the Knesset, and we'll play some segments from the Knesset, I was just like, so many things are just happening, and so many people are calling because it's summer. People are coming into the land.
Remember those summers where nobody was coming? Do you remember those 2 summers we had where nobody came to Israel because it was COVID?
I nary remember that, really.
We went on a big trip to America, and we extended our ticket for free because there was no one to see in Israel, and the airlines were just like, yeah, fly whenever you want.
Well,
we got plenty of space.
That's not this summer. This summer is huge, and people are coming in. My friend Jake is coming in for his daughter's bat mitzvah.
Mazel tov to Miriam.
And my friend Adam is coming in. And a lot, just people are coming in. Listeners to the show are coming in. And if you are coming in and you want to see me and you want to go to Hebron, then write to me at YishaiFleisher.com or sign up on the Hebron Fund Tour, which is hebronfund.org/tour. And I can meet you on the tour. And bottom line is that you know, if you're coming in, don't be a stranger. This is the time. We're aware of that. We're aware that this is the big time to come in. You know who else came in just now? About 30, 40 volunteers for the Hayovel organization. Mm-hmm. Okay, these are non-Jews, Bible lovers who are here in the land, and they came in a young group, like 18 to 36, and they came and they volunteered in Hebron to clean up the land, to make, to help with some roofing, to help with some shvil, what's it called, path making.
Yeah,
and to help get rid of some underbrush and some weeds and some thicket, and in the meantime,
yeah, they're like real, authentic American farm people.
That's right. So
they know how to do things with their hands.
Right. So there's a mixture.
Unlike us, who was like not allowed to own land for like thousands of years in different places, they were always allowed to own land. So they know how to work the land.
Yeah, and there's a awesome admixture of pro-Israel, pro-Bible, pro-Israelism.
Right.
And then at the same time, a mix of that with American can-doism.
Right.
And frontierism.
Right. With a little elbow grease, we can accomplish anything.
Right. A little Dukes of Hazzard. And then boom, you know, you just have an amazing combination.
Right.
And I gave them the full experience. Along with touring the Tomb of the Patriarchs and the Matriarchs at the end.
Yep.
They also got yelled at by a world-class anti-Israel propagandist and instigator
and convict,
the one and only Issa Amru, who of course made a video out of his little
telephone.
You are on my land, apartheid. You came from away. You didn't even ask me. I'm like, this is public land. He's like, you didn't even ask me. Now you are occupiers. You are helping the occupiers. Gave him the whole spiel, and they were like, you know, these are young people. They were a little deer in headlights. Had to help them with that. Of course,
they're not used to being attacked.
Right. They're not used to being told that they're doing evil when they're like, we're here doing good. Right. So there was that. And then there was the, then we gathered a lot of the thicket and the weeds into a big pit, and we lit it on fire. Well, the army came.
Because there was a fire.
Well, no, they came because the smoke was causing blockage, supposedly.
Oh, of their visibility.
To the camera, the ladies, the army female soldiers who watch the cameras all over the region, and they're like, turn it off. I'm like, I can't, and I won't, and then you'll have to wait 10 more minutes. They're like, it's a security threat. I'm like, no, it's not. If you can't see somewhere, just go over there and
stand next to it.
Stand there. It's all good. Everything's good. And it's done in 10 minutes. Even if I wanted to turn off the fire, I couldn't.
And it would still be smoky.
It would still be even smokier. If you try to turn off a fire like that with water and stuff, it's just going to, smoke up and stuff. So they saw me in Jewish-Israeli negotiations, like, get off me, Al Tigabi, like that kind of thing, negotiations with soldiers. So they saw that. And of course, just to touch the land and to beautify the land and to be thanked and recognized by the folks of the Jewish community of Hebron, who are naturally suspicious of non-Jewish, pro-Bible, pro-Israel folks.
Right. They don't know what their motivations are.
Right. But instead, they came in and they had a great time. And it's one of these experiences that touches you for life. And it was just beautiful. And
I just want to say, if you want to hear a good news broadcast on a basically daily basis, the Hayovel group has actually 2 members of the Hayovel group do a really cool show on YouTube called The Israel Guys.
That's right. They do a great job.
And it's worth watching.
And they have great T-shirts as well. Okay. I also want to reach out to my Muslim brothers and sisters and wish everybody a happy Eid el-Adha. Okay, yesterday, the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs was closed, and so was the Temple Mount.
Closed to Jews. It was open to Muslims.
Open to Muslims, closed to Jews, and so too on the Temple Mount, Eid el-Adha. Now, Eid el-Adha celebrates... This now, though I'm wishing a well wishes to my Muslim brothers and sisters, I need to help make a tiny correction here, because there's some, let's just call it not quite correct information that may stem from some understanding of Quranic verses, but basically, according to the Quran, Ibrahim, i.e. Abraham,
yes,
Avraham,
yes,
took up a son, it's not exactly clear which son,
okay,
to Mount Arafat, because he was...
Where is that?
In Saudi Arabia.
Oh.
And he took him up there in order to almost sacrifice him. Then God, and in the we plural of the Quranic version of how God sounds, it's like, and we told him to stop and basically stopped him. And then they get good tidings of the son Isaac. So very confusing. The bottom line is that according to old Muslim scholars, it was indeed, like 150 Muslim scholars said, it was Isaac who was almost sacrificed on Mount Arafat and is celebrated at Eid el-Adha, the holiday of the sacrifice. But according to the majority of Islam, and certainly the Islam today, it was Ishmael who was brought up to the mountain and not Isaac at all. And only then was Isaac born, and that's what it means that there was good tidings of Isaac being born. Why am I saying this? Because the vast majority of Islam understands Eid al-Adha to represent the binding of Ishmael by Ibrahim at Mount Arafat. So I just want to make it clear to help everybody out there with some of the misunderstandings, okay? It was Avraham actually did go up on the mountain, and it was the Temple Mount, the
Mount
revered
Moriah.
Temple, Mount Moriah.
Moriah.
And it was definitely, and I don't want to hurt anybody's feelings, but it was definitely Yitzchak. You see, the Torah, which predates the Quran and has a much clearer sense of what happened here in the Holy Land about Ibrahim, who was a Hebrew-speaking Jew, Semite, lays it out pretty clearly and kind of explains to you what the Quran is talking about, which is that it was Avraham on the Temple Mount with Yitzchak. Ishmael did not go up. And the reason that this is important is that some might be given to believe that this Muslim holiday is a supersessionist holiday, trying to erase the story of Yitzchak and the binding, which is a foundational story of the Torah and of the Jewish people. I know nobody would want that. So I just want to make sure that everybody gets it clear.
Thank you.
And have a nice Eid al-Adha. I think that we could all, and I'm going to celebrate today Eid al-Adha.
How?
I'm going to celebrate it by celebrating Ibrahim's a bringing of Isaac to the Temple Mount. I'm going to celebrate this holiday of the sacrifice by saying, that's right, folks, let's remember Abraham. Let's remember the story of Isaac on the Temple Mount, the Jewish connection to this place, the children of Abraham's connection to this place. Just want to make sure that everybody, say it's very simple. See, to me, Christmas, that's the day when we celebrate King David, right? It's like
I don't see the connection there.
I just want to help people, because some people think that, I just want to help people understand there's a way to remember these holidays in a way that's proper and correct and biblically accurate. And so Eid al-Adha, if you're going to have to celebrate it, let's celebrate it correctly, which is the binding of Isaac. We don't have a holiday for the binding of Isaac. We talk about it on Rosh Hashanah. But I say Eid al-Adha, the binding of Isaac on the Temple Mount. A great memorial and other such ideas. So there you go, Malka. We now talked about... And one of the Hayovel guys started asking me, he's like, do you guys understand us to be Esau? Like Esau?
Yes.
Or Edom, he says to me. And I laid out to him,
Well, what'd you say?
You know what I told him? I told him what the Gaon...
Wait, why don't you explain what you're talking about here?
So there's these non-Jewish, American, Bible-loving folks, and they are out there working the land, and he's asking me, do you understand, working the good land here in the land of Israel and volunteering to beautify it, coming out in spite of their neighbors and friends who tell them, don't come to the land of Israel, it's dangerous, in spite of the fact that there's like shootings at Hawara and all that kind of stuff. So they're coming out here, or in Eli, God forbid, and so they're coming out here. And he asked me, like, are we, in your eyes, Edom from the Bible, the older brother of Jacob, and the one who's always fought with him and caused so many pains and tribulations.
Right, and an enemy of the children of Israel.
Right. So I said to him what the Gaon of Vilna says, which is there's a sifting going on. There's a sifting. I said, yes. Generally, in a broad sense, we understand the West, Western Europe, America, to be part of the Edom, Roman type of, but there's a sifting. I said to him, do you see America as one thing? Is it pro-Israel or anti-Israel? He's like, well, it's kind of both. In many ways, it's anti, and part of it are very pro. So I said, there's a sifting going on. And there's a sifting going on in the Muslim world as well. There's a sifting. There's the pro-Israel folks like Morocco. My mom came back from Morocco. Was like, these guys do not care about the so-called Palestine, which I, by the way, now spell P-A-L-S. P-A-L-E-S-T-E-I-N. Palestine, okay? That's right. Palestine is Jewish. That's what T-shirt I want to make. Let me know, by the way, if you want that T-shirt. If people write to me, say, I want a T-shirt that says Palestine is Jewish, then we'll make it. But in any case, so I said to him, there's a sifting going on. And there's a third sifting, which is amongst the Jewish people. Look at us here in Israel. There's such a strong pro-Israel, pro-nationalist, pro-Torah outlook. And then there's a strong anti, post-Zionist, post-Torah. There's a birur, a sifting that's happening right now. And that's the time that we're in. So yeah, maybe I generally may see you guys as Edom, but like I'm sifting.
Right. Each person is their own cheshbon, is their own account.
Right. I told them when I see an Arab, I decide immediately, are you an Ishmaelite, which means that you're my half brother, or are you a Philistine, which means that you're an invader and a foreigner, and therefore I make that determination. How do you act? What's inside of you? Those are two very different trajectories. If you're an Ishmaelite or you're a Philistine, those are different trajectories in my mind. Any case, Malka, wow, that was some serious philosophy, right?
Yeah.
Yesterday,
well, how did they receive that?
They received it great. With things that come from the heart, and the real first thing, it's a whopper of an education. You're out there, you're seeing the different tensions, you're understanding the different tensions.
How did they react? Did they get mad?
At who?
When they were being yelled at by anti-Israel activists, did they get upset? Did they get freaked out?
It was more wonderment and how do I it really depends on the level of education that you already had beforehand. Mm-hmm. But I think for a lot of them it was processing. You don't often meet somebody who's accusing you of these things, and then you have to analyze, is this true, is this not true? Luckily I was there to dispel, because Isamru is quite what's it called when you're good at convincing other people? He's meshachnea in Hebrew. Persuasive. Thank you, Malka. Quite well.
Thank you.
Well done. I'm
good at synonyms.
Malka, yesterday I was at the Knesset, and the first thing that happened is that I sat down. Not the first thing, but I'm doing some intermittent fasting. 1:00 I sat down to eat some lunch. I got some fish.
Nice.
Some Moroccan fish.
Yeah, Moroccan fish.
And some something you might not know called broccoli. Broccoli, which is broccoli.
Yes.
Okay.
Very good.
In modern Hebrew, broccoli. And so I got some of that. And a dude came down and sat down next to me. Clearly a wizened type. I saw it you get to know the types. I'm clearly a learned, wizened type.
All right.
And he immediately told me that he had just completed his doctorate on the kind of math that didn't exist in the time of the sages, and how would they have dealt with certain questions. He goes, there are many places where the sages are we know our math isn't totally accurate here, but here's how we see certain halachic questions. He's had they had a math that was only developed later on, how would they have solved it?
What?
And he wrote, because there's a lot of math in Jewish issues and Jewish law, and a lot of, for example, they were very good at calculating the moon and the stars and all the constellations and the cycles, the 21-year cycle of the sun and all kinds of stuff like that. 22-year cycle? Is it 22 years? Whatever. In any case, I do not profess to be a math genius, but in any case, he finished his doctorate. Now he wants to teach math to the ultra-Orthodox through his curriculum.
Whoa.
And he wants to teach...
Through like a Gemara comparison curriculum.
Right, and he wants to teach Torah to math types
What?
both ways. Well...
That's cool.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah, and he sat down and told me all this stuff. It was really great. So this reminds me also of the fact that Rabbi Shimshon Cohen Nadel, our resident scholar, is with us today to talk about did the sages study science? And this was a very dear topic to our rabbi, our joint rabbi, Rabbi Moshe David Tendler, a great both scholar, rabbi and scholar. And I think that Rabbi Shimshon is in many ways a continuation of that path. And so here he is today with the question of, did the sages study science?
Shalom Yishai. A fascinating and fundamental question which we must explore. Did our sages study science? Did their intellectual curiosity and intellectual pursuits extend beyond the 4 cubits, the 4 L's of the Beit Midrash, the house of study? And if so, to what end? For what purpose? What goal? How did this knowledge serve them? A famous Midrashic statement relates, there is chokhmah, wisdom, to be found among the Gentiles. For our sages, this wisdom represents all the different disciplines and areas of human discovery. And this statement is not hyperbole. It's not just some nice idea. It's not merely theoretical. An appreciation and an understanding of this wisdom, science, medicine, technology is indispensable to be able to interpret the Torah and perform its mitzvot. The Talmud is full of examples of how our sages used science and mathematics, for example, to assist in their understanding of Torah, like when the sage Rav spent 18 months living among the shepherds to study what types of blemishes on animals heal and which do not. He was studying anatomy, biology 101, or how Rabbi Zera was hesitant to rule on issues of family purity without the requisite knowledge of the physiology involved. The sage Shmuel was an expert in astronomy and boasts how he could single-handedly calculate the calendar for the entire diaspora Jewry. The Talmud even offers criticism for one who knows how to make such astronomical calculations but does not, concluding that it is even a mitzvah to make such calculations. And throughout Jewish history, many of our great thinkers and leaders were broad, worldly, educated, and studied this wisdom, these disciplines. Maimonides, Nachmanides, and Yehuda Halevi were physicians and philosophers. Dan Yitzchak Abravanel was a statesman. These great men possessed an intellectual prowess and curiosity which unfortunately is absent in many corners of religious life today. They understood, like Rabbi Samson Raphael Hirsch writes, that the beauty and wisdom found in Western culture can dwell in the tents of Torah. As we read in our Torah just a few weeks ago in Bamidbar chapter 8, Aharon the high priest is instructed, when you kindle the lamps towards the center of the menorah shall the 7 lamps cast light. And as Rabbi Naftali Tzvi Berlin writes in his commentary, the branches of the menorah represent the pillars of wisdom and knowledge. The center lamp to which all of the other branches must face represents the light of our Torah. Torah is at the center, but its study and understanding requires illumination from the light of these other branches of wisdom. These other disciplines shed their light on our Torah. This idea is often attributed to Rabbi Eliyahu ben Shlomo Zalman of Vilna. the Vilna Gaon. For many, the Vilna Gaon personifies the perfected Torah personality with his complete, unflinching dedication to Torah study. Yet the Gaon also possessed a profound knowledge and deep understanding of secular studies, even encouraging the study of secular subjects among his students. In their introduction to one of his works, Aderet Eliyahu, the Vilna Gaon's own children attest to the fact that, quote, by the time he was 12 years old, he had mastered the 7 branches of secular wisdom. One of the Vilna Gaon's disciples, Rabbi Yisrael of Shklov, writes in the introduction to his Pa'at HaShulchan, he, the Vilna Gaon, explained that all secular wisdom is essential for our Holy Torah and is included within it. He indicated that he had mastered all the branches of secular wisdom, including algebra, trigonometry, geometry, and music. The Gaon traveled between Athens and Vilna effortlessly. And according to written testimony, the Gaon openly encouraged his students to pursue secular knowledge. Another student, Rabbi Baruch Schick of Shklov, translated Euclid's Elements into Hebrew. Euclid, considered the father of geometry, lays down the major principles of geometry in this classic work written around 300 BCE. In the preface to his Hebrew translation, Rabbi Schick writes, quote, I heard from his, meaning the Gaon's, holy lips that to the extent one is deficient in secular wisdom, he will be deficient 100-fold in Torah study, for Torah and wisdom are bound up together. He continues and writes that the Vilna Gaon commanded him to, quote, translate into Hebrew as much secular wisdom as possible, making it accessible to the broader Jewish community. Now, should anyone question the veracity of this account, it was published in The Hague in 1780 during the Gaon's own lifetime. For our great sages over the centuries, an understanding and appreciation of science and nature was indispensable in order to truly understand and appreciate the Torah and apply Jewish law. But sometimes the scientific or medical pronouncements or assumptions in the Talmud are incorrect or inconsistent with modern science, like the Mishnah, which discusses the kashrut status of an animal missing its kidneys or other vital organs, which simply cannot be, as the animal could not live, or passages in the Mishnah or the Talmud which discuss the ritual status, the purity of an animal that is half rodent, half dirt. Can such a thing exist? Did such a thing ever exist? Or the statement in the Talmud which permits killing lice on the Sabbath, as they do not reproduce. How do we deal with that? How do we reconcile that? Do we say that our sages can't be wrong, they are infallible and capable of making mistakes? Or no, our sages simply base themselves on the science of their day, the scientific and medical beliefs of the times in which they lived, and the works of natural history of the Greeks and Romans from that very period, like the 1st century Roman naturalist Pliny the Elder, which describes such cases, such animals. Our sages were dealing in theoreticals. They may not have seen such a creature, but what if such an animal would exist? What would the law be? The Talmud permits killing lice on the Sabbath, as lice don't reproduce. Our sages believed in spontaneous generation, just like the entire world did at the time. It's not that our sages were in error. It's that they trusted the scientists and the doctors of their day. And so great rabbis like the Rambam, for example, and many before him and after, rule that we are not obligated to follow the medical advice in the Talmud if it's not consistent with the current thinking in medicine. Because our great sages were basing themselves on the medicine of their times. And we all saw how during the pandemic, the scientific community and medical community can make mistakes trying to figure things out in real time. And 1,000 years from now, many of the things that we believe to be true may also be proven wrong or inconsistent with the current thought or trend or practice in medicine. But beyond just using science in order to interpret and apply the Torah to the natural world, there is an intrinsic value to it. The Rambam, Maimonides, defining the mitzvah to love and fear God, asks, what is the path to love and fear God? When a person contemplates, he writes, quote, his wondrous and great deeds and creations and appreciates his infinite wisdom that surpasses all comparison, he will immediately love, praise, and glorify him, yearning with a tremendous desire to know God and his great name. As King David stated in Psalm 42, my soul thirsts for the Lord, for the living God. Through this study, understanding, and appreciation of God's glorious creation, his wondrous world, we can begin to try and understand and appreciate God himself. Wishing all of the listeners blessings from Jerusalem.
Okay, that was pretty elucidating, right, Malka?
Yeah, wow.
The sages study science. That's pretty cool stuff. Thank you, Rabbi Shimshon. Great stuff. And Rabbi Shimshon HaKohen Neidel is, of course, Jerusalem's Kihilat Zichron Yosef's rabbi and spiritual leader. Malka, speaking of great, sages and deep thoughts, The Forward, a newspaper that I like to peruse in order to get a chuckle and a giggle, and sometimes some revulsion.
Okay, sounds fun.
Had this headline. I mean, every other headline for them is Yiddish this and Mel Brooks that. I mean, the Times. I wanted to do some kind of scientific research. How many times can you mention Mel Brooks in a year or Woody Allen in a year? Really? Okay. So here's a nice one. Why I decided to give my dog a bark mitzvah.
Is that real?
Oh yeah. A report from Coco's coming of age ceremony was one of the not only was it in the email of The Forward, it was even in the title. They were like dog bar mitzvahs. Is that the coming thing?
It's unfortunate that no one could see my jaw being on the floor here on this podcast.
Let me read that title again. Why I decided to give my dog a bark mitzvah.
People are bored.
A report from Coco's coming of age ceremony.
No one has what to spend their money on.
Even if people are not bored, right? It's like I'm The Forward. I'm this like liberal Jewish newspaper of with great heritage.
Yes.
Really? You're really gonna not only gonna print
wait,
that,
what did you read it?
Yeah, and it's about
what's the conclusion? Did they make like a big serious party?
Yeah.
Or was it like a little thing in their living room?
This
where
dog
they made
reached the age of maturity. Whatever it was.
What is the age of maturity for a dog?
I don't want
8 months old.
I don't want to delve into it any more than this. I don't want to go any further. The bottom line is this was a headline. It was serious. It was a real article. It was a cutesy article, but like the bottom line is that I'm like, if you wonder, yeah.
You're doing
why?
great.
I know. I'm doing it. Why like Reform conservative Judaism is failing. Oh, and the next day they had another article being like, there's a shortage of rabbis in Reform conservative, so they're taking cantors.
Wait,
they basically don't have enough people to lead these congregations anymore.
No one wants to be a rabbi?
No, there are many people who want to be a rabbi.
They don't want to be a Reform rabbi?
Yeah, Reform conservative rabbis.
Why not?
Why not? The answer is simple: because you have bark mitzvahs. And if you have a bark mitzvahs, why don't you just ordain the dog already? Send them through yeshiva and already ordain him. If he's already bar mitzvah, it might as well go all the way.
Bark mitzvah.
Yeah, bark mitzvah. It's when you take
something serious and
progressivism, liberalism, and you turn it into mush, and you turn it into dog food, then that's going to be a religion that's not too attractive. Yeah, you take progressivism, you take liberalism. There are some good values there, but when you start turning it into a replacement theology of Judaism, and you start kind of like turning it into just mush.
Yeah, but I don't think this is a replacement theology. I think that this is one of those cases in which like Jewish humor went too far. It's like there's a place, humor is a big part of Jewishness, and I think that some people have like. Speaking of Mel Brooks, right? You're like talking about how the Forward is always talking about Mel Brooks. It's like Jewish humor has become a higher value to some people than like Jewish wisdom or Jewish Jewish
scholarship,
commitment or something like that. It's like, or Jewish, fear of heaven. It's like, to make a joke out of your serious stuff is to like dilute it. You know what I mean? It's like, and I appreciate
I really
that.
like what you're saying, and I wish that you would go back to my tweet that I tweeted this thing and write that as a few paragraphs. I think you're saying so correctly. I think you're saying it very, very, very right. And there are these Jewish values that are, as you said, like kind of forgotten amongst the certain groups.
Right, and it's like I understand that like the bar mitzvah in America is like this big overblown celebration that's like a little bit humorous, but at some point it has to not be funny. Like at some point it has to be real and true and ancient and meaningful,
And pure,
you know, and awesome. But yeah, it has to be something real. And when you start to make everything like hilarious, then it's called leitzanut, actually, which means like clownishness. And it's one of the traits that you have to ask for forgiveness for on Yom Kippur.
Mm-hmm.
It's like one of the list of sins, actually, is leitzanut.
Maka, you're coming out strong.
Yeah,
here.
I could be a Reform rabbi.
No. By the way, I want to start telling people I'm a Reconstructionist rabbi. I want to have a hat.
The temple.
Yeah, I'm a Reconstructionist rabbi. I'm just like into Reconstruction. I'm like all about Reconstructionism, the Jewish state, der Judenstaat, and the temple, of course. That's the next step. You know, we're Reconstructionists around here. Well, there are people that want to stop us from reconstructing too much. Obviously, terrorism.
Yep.
And also, the Biden administration is trying to stop us from developing Judea and Samaria. There was a story out that they are going to stop the scientific cooperation and the different grant monies that they have for scientific exploration in Israel, and they are blocking what the Trump administration unblocked. They're reblocking the grants to Jews of Judea and Samaria in their racist, bigoted policies. And then you have the actual terrorists themselves. And then you have, the Iranians and the bomb and all that. But I was speaking with international law expert Yishai Segal, who's also the head of Chetz. And she was telling me... Chetz is an organization that just promotes cooperation between Israel and America, fights anti-Semitism all over the world, and just kind of does a whole host of projects of good guy work, good gal work in this case. And Yishai was at the Knesset, and we talked about another threat, which is the internal tension. This was an interesting, and we were not perfectly aligned, a conversation. So
what does that mean?
We had some disagreements in the conversation.
That's good. That'll be interesting.
I think you'll enjoy it. So here's Yishai Segal at the Knesset. All right, folks, Yishai Fleisher here, still at the Knesset. And I was in a room with three jurists who came to meet with Minister Ben-Gvir. Their main concern was how Israel is perceived in the international media, but especially in their mind, the rift that's in Israeli society is one that says that Israel is not as stable as it was before, that there's a great internal fight, and that some parts of the government are running away with the country, taking away the freedom of others, and they, being liberal Jews, are very concerned about how the country's acting and how their friends are perceiving Israel's acting, or how the American government. And they asked me over and over again, is it even important to you, our relationship, the relationship of Israel and America, or Israel and American Jewry? And I kept trying to say to them, so we're not really talking about the facts, we're talking about perceptions. And the perceptions are of a great rift between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry, between what's going on in Israel, and maybe the more liberal sides of Israel are concerned with how the right-wing government is operating, and you see that in the media all the time, the most right-wing government. I saw that this week in a big AP story, the most right-wing government. And so the question is, do we know how much the Israeli rift is actually hurting the broader relationship of Israel to the world, to American Jewry? And are the actors at play, the same actors that are trying to undermine Israel, are they the ones behind the rift, the societal rift in Israel? Here at the Knesset, I am joined by Yishai Segal, who is the managing director of Chetz, and also an expert in international law, and is a friend. And Yishai is here with me today. And that's the issue that is on her mind as well. She's fought BDS famously in the past. But now she is fighting the delegitimization now coming especially from the rift between Israeli Jewry itself inside and American Israeli Jewry. Yifan, what do you think?
Well, first of all, thank you. Hi, it's good to be with you today. Well, unfortunately, it's a very sad, I think it's more than sad, it's a very risky, situation that we're in. And I think the Israeli society needs to first understand, what is going on. And second thing is just to stop and take a deep breath and try to see how we communicate with each other. Do we even give the other the benefit of the doubt to understand what their feelings are, what their concerns are, what they're afraid of, what they want. And I think at the end of the day, the real tragedy is that there is no such real difference between, what you now conceive as two camps. I mean, I think we generally want the same thing. We just don't know how to communicate it so much. Now, this is not a situation that is very...
So you're talking about polarity. Right, you're talking about polarity. Now, Israel's got a polarity right now. The question is this polarity a kind of global-wide atmosphere which has come out of America, or are there people engineering this polarity? I actually believe I'm on the latter side. I think that there's engineers to the polarity. I think there's people who make money off of it or have interests that work through polarity. In my mind, it's also Marxism. Marxism is a ideology by which you exploit societal rifts. And that's what I'm sensing. How do you see it?
Well, I think it's a combination, and I think it's not so wise to just stop and say, it's not our fault. It's those opportunists that are trying to to exploit the weaknesses or cynically exploiting the situation. I think if you stop there, then you're not going to do anything to really help the situation. So first we have to stop and see where we can take responsibility and see what we have done wrong to not reach out to whatever the other side is to each and every one of us, understand them and extend, like an olive branch. So to answer your questions, I guess. First of all, it's how the West, I think, is now everywhere in the world. There's a rift. The rhetoric is getting worse and worse. It's horrible. And the same thing is happening in Israel, unfortunately. The difference is that I really don't think that there's a real, massive disagreements on essential, fundamental issues here in Israel. Okay, and I'll give you an example. I think that most of us, the vast majority of us, want to protect Israel to be, a democracy that protects human rights.
Well, before you go to democracy, before that, I said to these guys, before we talk about democracy, first, it's a Jewish state that is trying to defend the Jewish people in our ancestral homeland. That's the first goal. We're post-Holocaust people. Before we talk about the values of democracy, that's a way further value than the simple value of defending our peoplehood. And that is not being achieved, perfectly well yet. So, before I go to the great values of, of a system that is a good system, but it's not everything. First and foremost, I have to protect life and liberty of Jewish people, don't I?
I don't think they're mutually exclusive at all. And I think, 75 years of Israeli independence have proven that they're not mutually exclusive. I mean, the fact that we want to, defend Israel as a Jewish state, and we want to defend our borders, and we want to defend ourselves against our enemies, domestically and abroad, is extremely important. And the fact that we want to keep sustaining Israel as a democracy with all that, what that means, that works perfectly, has been working perfectly. No reason for it to not, coexist, beautifully as it did and as it should be. So I don't think we need to, to find a hierarchy. And even, that's just, another way for people who are trying to find reasons to come between us, arguments like that, because we definitely have seen it work and we can make it work. So,
well, in my world, the enemies use the word democracy to undermine our rights to the land because they say, look, you're not democratic. And I always say to them, because that's not our first and foremost goal. Our first and foremost goal is to defend our people. The democracy word is used against me oftentimes.
So reclaim it. Why do you allow them? Why do you allow them to what do you say, to associate a word with their radical agenda? Democracy is democracy. They don't. No one owns democracy. We, as a Jewish state, have been living in a democracy that I think is a beacon of light to the world. Right? I mean, the fact that we have multiple opinions and we argue and we fight, it's just an example of how beautiful our democracy is. Sometimes it comes with some some challenges, but it is a beautifully working democracy.
Well, the question, again, when we live in a little bit different worlds, right? In the world of Judea and Samaria, if I'm thinking about annexation, I've got to worry about the questions of what to do with the Arabs. And if I'm all for democracy, that's my first value, then I'm obliged to somehow give away, freedom of vote to everybody. I'm not so sure I want that. And so therefore I have to minimize a little bit the value of democracy. And I'll give you an example. I was just...
Wait, I want to stop you there. I think, first of all, I think the fact that you're using the word annexation, I have to stop you with that. Annexation means that you're taking a territory that is not yours and you're annexing it to a territory that is yours. Sure. Okay, if we believe, you and I both believe, that the Jewish people in the state of Israel has a legal title to Judea and Samaria. So if we extend sovereignty to Judea and Samaria, it's not an annexation. It's a political decision to extend sovereignty to a territory that is legally ours. So first of all, let's be clear on the terminology because it's important. Second of all, I think that there is a vast majority in Israel today, what we didn't have 20, 25 years ago, that understands that there is no point in trying to figure out what the solution would be with the Palestinians as long as there is no partner for peace in the Palestinian side. So, there was no point to try to, argue about, what will be one day when the Palestinians might maybe have a leadership willing to truly, honestly discuss peace. So, let's...
Who's talking about peace? I'm talking about asserting sovereignty over our land. I'm not talking about peace. I'm not talking about with the PA. I'm just talking about if I now control this whole territory and there's people living there.
Yeah, but it's not very hard. It's impossible now to talk about anything, I think, right now in this moment in time beyond Area C, right? I mean, what's going to happen with Area A and Area B or Gaza, that's, I think, far, far in the future. I think I always, when people ask me what will be the future of Area A and B, and I say, well, do you want to buy a penthouse on Mars? So what's the conditions, right? What's the year? What's the condition? What are the circumstances? I don't know. So I don't want to talk about Area A and B until there's reason to talk about it. So extending sovereignty to Area C, it's a political choice. I don't see an impediment to that, other than, maybe it's diplomatically, there are various arguments that can be made, and it's an important political discussion, but it is a possibility, politically and legally.
Okay, this is very interesting stuff. For me, I figure there's really no way to only control Area C, because the truth of the matter is, if you look at the map, it's just a very ugly and impossible control, roads and small, inlets and outlets, and it doesn't work that way. Like in my mind, Israel will get back to areas A and B, because that's the normative way to control Judea and Samaria, which is our ancestral heartland, on top of which the PA is a regressive, corrupt, jihadist regime. We're not going to be able to live with them. So I hope that we don't allow. I'll get your turn. I hope we don't allow ourselves to allow A and B to equate that to the Gaza situation. All of those were mistakes in my mind. But I hope that we don't really. I hope we have not totally let go of A and B the way that you're describing.
No, I'm not talking about letting it go at all. I'm just saying realistically what is the situation right now today. So I just want to say that very recently, like in the last few days, I think, there was a research that was done by the Bitronistim. I don't know how they call themselves in English.
They're the officers. They're the more nationalistic side of the officer core group that believes in Jewish rights of the land of Israel and a strong defense as opposed to giving away land.
Yes, so there's a very interesting research that came out that you see all these, kind of weird hybrid situations around the world of entities that are not exactly states, like semi-states, autonomy of different sorts, and enclaves in different other territorial, there are things that were invented, hundreds of situations around the world. You can see the report. It's fascinating. So by the way, it's just like we can be a little bit more creative than just like, a zero-sum game of state or not state, PA or not PA.
This is very important. This is very important what you're saying. And we're a lot of times locked into a very limited model. Whenever I talk to people about like Puerto Rico, they're like, nah! Or I say to them, look, the United States even holds territories. Look at how they treat them. There's different ways. There's different models. Even one of the greatest democracies in the world, certainly in our Middle East. So I agree with you, and I'm going to look forward to that Bitronistim report.
I'll send it to you. And so going back to our issue, I really think that, I look at how the delegitimization movement is thriving in the last few months. I mean, we're doing their work for them because we end up being the ones who accuse each other of being, a dictatorship, violating human rights, fighting in civil war, all these words that are so horrible because we've come to a point where we don't understand how important it is for me to stop and say, hey, what are you afraid of? What are your concerns? I mean, what drives you to, I don't know, either go to the demonstrations on Saturday nights in Kaplan Street in Tel Aviv or be supportive of the judicial reform? And I have to tell you, when I've sat down with friends and colleagues and really drilled down into the issues, like what do we really believe? What is it that we're trying to achieve? You'll see that there are no real differences. There are no real differences. And so if we just allow ourselves to understand that we need to give the other person the benefit of the doubt, you don't mean no harm, right? Unless you prove otherwise. But, just to give you the benefit of the doubt that you mean well. And
so you're talking about also civility. That's an English word. Yeah. I don't even know if we have it exactly here in Israel. Civil discourse, civility. And I can't disagree with you that we're definitely lacking that right now, a sense of civility. But you and I had a little disagreement in the beginning where I thought, there are more active actors here. Certainly, you'll have to agree with me that the pro-Palestinian, anti-Israel blood libel narrative is extremely active, and the state of Israel is not doing a lot to curb it. I'll just give you an example. I have, in Hebron, right next to the Jewish community, in an area called Tel Rumeda, we have an anti-Israel activist of world-class stature. His name is Issa Amru. He's one of the best anti-Israel people. And I keep on saying to the army, I say to them, move him out of here. He's going to cause violence. People will die and bleed and die on this thing. He seems to you that he's just a media personality, but in fact he's a media terrorist. Yeah. And he creates an atmosphere. And he heats up the region, the area, and he gets other Arabs involved in it, and other Arabs actually curse him because he takes away the peace. But our country is afraid to deal with him because he's got international connections, and they're afraid to take him on, and because they don't want the bad videos and the bad press. And in the meantime, he keeps growing and growing, and I see that all the time. Israel does not deal with the delegitimization issue. It just doesn't want to attack it, doesn't want to face it for real.
Well, I think they want to face it for real. I think there are a lot of hurdles and problems and a lot of people that are too afraid to take responsibility, as you said, and I know a lot of these cases. And I think everything kind of ties in together. I mean, if we were more focused on what we have in common, right? I mean, if you go even, friends and colleagues that you speak to, I imagine, all the political spectrum between, left and right. I'm not talking about the radicals. They will agree with you. A person like that should be stopped, right? I mean, it's not outside the broad consensus of Israeli society. It's just that we're too busy with internal feuds about, nonsense, that it's just miscommunications and things that were aggravated in the media discourse and all of that, that we can't even unite around the issues that we all agree on that are super important and critical. So everything kind of links together. So the media is now trying to link everything to judicial reform, and it happens on both camps, right? So it's just, that's what I've been busy doing, in these past few months, just talking to my fellow Israelis and say, even to my government, why haven't you come out to say, we understand the fear that is in your hearts when you go to demonstrate. We understand you and we support you and we are with you. Because obviously I think that this is not why they're trying to pass judicial reform. And if you tell the people, when I speak to people who go to demonstrate, and I tell them, are you against revoking citizenship of terrorists? Are you against having a stronger anti-boycott law? Are you against, all these type of things that were revoked by the Supreme Court here in Israel? They will all say, absolutely not. We're with you on those issues. So why can't we all just understand that we actually agree on all these fundamental issues and just try to, build a better society, first of all, at home? And then we will make sure that we don't fuel the haters around the world, because that's exactly what we have been doing in this past few months. And God forbid the country will fall apart because we can't get along over just miscommunication and just nonsense, unfortunately.
Right, sinat chinam, that's what you're saying, which is just a baseless hatred hatred over nothing, and that's a plague that the Jewish people have had, and that's our, how should we say, that's like our undoing, that's our counter energy. On the one hand, we're an Am HaNetzach, we're an eternal people, and we keep on being vibrant and alive throughout all these generations. And on the other hand, that's our Achilles heel, which is this like self-hating, this self-loathe, this although the externals never get rid of us, the thing that weakens us always is our internal hate for one another. That's a classic problem of the Jewish people, and we're definitely fighting that. Ifa Segal is the managing director of Chetz, and also an expert in international law, meeting me here at the Knesset. Ifa, thank you so much.
Thanks for having me. Thanks so much.
All right, Ifa, thank you
Very
so much.
interesting.
Yeah, that's right. She and I clashed a tad, but it was fun. And
That's okay. That's Jewish.
That's Jewish, and certainly Knesset, and it certainly was good conversation, and it was eye-opening for me to understand that areas in the minds of some thinkers, areas A and B in Judea and Samaria are lost and are like Gaza.
I just want to say that I really appreciate Senator Ted Cruz, who came out with a tweet this week condemning the Biden administration for its academic boycott of Israeli professors just because of their location in Judea and Samaria. There's always, you were talking before about like, do we see America as Edom, as Esav, as Esau? And you're talking about the not the threshing, what do you call it? The sifting process?
Sifting, yeah. Birur.
The birur. And this is such a perfect example of that. It's like, is America pro-Israel or anti-Israel? Now, the Biden administration, an academic boycott, it's like for a country that is like all about like rights and free speech and freedom and manifest destiny and all this. It's like for them to be the country that's like, we don't include these thinkers because they're at like Ariel University, but we will include these speakers because they're at like Tel Aviv University. That is just disgusting. But then you have Senator Ted Cruz and like the backing of a huge swath of Americans who agree with him. I don't know if they want him to be their leader or whatever, but in terms of this ideology, they agree with him totally, which is like, how can you do this to the Jewish people? How can you do this to Israel? And how can you make such a statement that America is the kind of country that boycotts people based on where they are?
Mm-hmm. Well said, Malka. That's absolutely correct. And Ted Cruz has been a champion of Israel, for Israel. And by the way, that word champion is a big DC word.
Right.
It's not like supporter or I'm with you or I'm an
right.
activist. He's a champion. He's a
right.
champion. And he has always been a champion. And God bless him to continue to succeed. So important, Malka, to read the right news and to keep your mind really with a healthy media diet. And so JNS.org is a proud sponsor of the Yishai Fleisher Show, and I'm very proud to be associated with them. You also work for them.
That's right.
And JNS is a growing outfit, trying very much to make sure that the news is accurate, but also inspiring, and also from a perspective of nationalism, of strong Jewish rights in the land of Israel. And I very much support, and I hope that you guys go check out JNS.org. They also send out a great email, and JewishPress.com. More feisty, more opinionated, but also informational and on the spot. Very caught up to the latest, and just that their email gives you a real overview of both the Jewish and Israeli world. It makes a big difference. So watch your media diet. Make sure that you are eating. Your mind is imbibing. What's the word I'm looking for? Consuming the good stuff. Same thing with actual calories. May they be not just calories, but also healthy calories and holy calories. Holy calories, okay? That's a simple concept. How do you make your calories holy? First thing, the source has got to be holy. And then you have to put intent. You got to
put a blessing.
You got to put a blessing on it. That's right. And a great source for holy calories is Prohibition Pickle. They do a great job at creating a great, delicious, delightful, and holy food and spicy. I love their condiments, okay? And I will not condemn
Right.
their Jewish condiments that are made
Right.
in Judea and Samaria.
That's
right.
right.
I will uphold and support the condiments, including excellent mustard, which I was relishing.
Really good mustard.
I'm talking about a real...
I don't know why.
It was like a
I don't
new-
know what he did there.
Because it was a real New York mustard.
It was like, yeah.
It was a
I
real-
wish that I'd had a potato knish.
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
mouth is watering.
Yep, that's right. That's right.
You smear a little of that
A little
mustard on
smear.
there.
And you know what else? You got to relish that relish.
Yeah.
That was some good
Yeah,
relish.
good pickle relish.
Oh, my God. That was some great relish. And also some of these little jalapenos that are... forget about
Yeah,
it.
yeah.
Anyway.
He's good at the condiments.
Very good.
He has a hot sauce called Gehenna.
Yeah. It's good stuff. It's really good stuff. Malka, prohibitionpickle.co.il makes meat. They make great vegetables as well. But Ben Bresky, our intrepid
Reporter from the field
and historian, was out there, and he has a report for us on Jewish vegetarianism and veganism through the sources.
What?
And through, I think he went to
Golly.
some conference about vegan vegetarianism. And so here is the one and only intrepid Ben Bresky in the field about Jewish vegetarianism.
This is a moment in Jewish history. While I am not a vegan, it has always interested me, and so when my friend suggested we go to Vegan Fest in Tel Aviv, I said I would join. I recently had 2 episodes in a row where I talked about places in Israel I visited, but this week, like the previous week, I will be talking about places I missed going to. A vegetarian is someone who does not eat meat, and a vegan is someone who only eats plant-based food, meaning no meat or fish or dairy. Vegan Fest attracted tens of thousands for 2 days in Tel Aviv's Hayarkon Park. There were over 100 stalls with a wide range of food. Many reports say that Israel has a very high percentage of vegans and vegan restaurants, with Tel Aviv claiming at least 400 vegan restaurants. But what is the history of vegetarianism and veganism in Jewish tradition? Adam and Eve were said to be vegetarian, and some claim the prophet Isaiah was. In the 12th century, Asher ben Meshulam of France was said to have never tasted meat. The son of the revered Meshulam ben Yaakov, like his father, he was a renowned Talmudist. He was the author of several books on Jewish thought. The famous traveler Benjamin of Tudela met him during his journeys of around 1165 and wrote, Rabbeinu Meshulam, the great rabbi, has 5 sons who are wise, great, and wealthy. Rabbi Asher, the recluse, dwells apart from the world. He pores over his books days and night, fasts periodically, and abstains from all meat. Rabbi Yosef Albo and Rabbi Yitzhak Arama, both who lived in Spain during the Middle Ages, wrote that vegetarianism was a moral ideal for the butcher in order to refine his character. In 1938, Fania Levando published a vegetarian kosher cookbook in Yiddish called Vegetarisch Dietischer Kochbuch, 400 Speisen, gemacht aus Schlicht von Grinsen. Vegetarian Diet Cookbook, 400 dishes made exclusively from vegetables. She ran a vegetarian restaurant in the Jewish quarter of Vilna in today's Lithuania. Artist Mark Chagall and songwriter Itzik Manger were among those who dined there. Some came for health or ideological reasons, but others came because meat was expensive. She also ran a cooking school and ran a kosher kitchen on a Polish ocean liner. Her cookbook had vegetarian recipes for challah, cholent, potato latkes, and kugel. Fania and her husband Lazer died in 1941 during the Nazi invasion of the Soviet Union. Today, the book has been republished and translated into Polish and English. Today in Vilna, there is a plaque commemorating her and her husband and others who perished during World War II. Rabbi Avraham Yitzhak Kook, who became the first chief rabbi of the land of Israel in 1921, was mostly a vegetarian. It was only on Shabbat that Rabbi Kook would eat a small amount of chicken. His loyal student, Rabbi David Cohen, the Nazir, compiled his teachings on being a vegetarian, A Vision of Vegetarianism and Peace. In it, he quotes Rabbi Kook as teaching that he believed keeping kosher was a concession to the human desire to consume meat, and the true ideal was to be vegetarian, and that in the age of Mashiach, people would again return to the days of Adam and Eve and refrain from eating meat. Even the korbanot in the Holy Temple will consist only of vegetation. Rabbi Cohen, well known for never cutting his hair, was a vegetarian. But there are many instances of eating meat throughout Jewish tradition. Some consider it a mitzvah to eat meat on Shabbat, and holidays like Passover use meat in the traditions. My friend who invited me to Vegan Fest said that every year he hosts a vegan Passover Seder, and instead of the lamb shank bone on the Seder plate, he uses a roasted beet, or as the British call it, beetroot. Rabbi Huna in the Talmud, in Tractate Pesachim, briefly mentions eating beets on Passover. I have met other vegetarians and former vegetarians who tell me meat is healthy, but they consume only organic fresh meat. One Chabadnik told me he eats meat, but only that which he butchers himself on a nearby moshav. This year, Vegan Fest was considered a success, and organizers noted that they estimated only 52% of those who attended were vegan. I would have been one of them had I made it. Hopefully, my next podcast will be about a place that I actually visit. If you have any suggestions, you may email me at bbresky@gmail.com. That's bbresky@gmail.com. This has been a moment in Jewish history. Thank you to Yishai Fleisher. Thank you to all my vegan friends. Thank you to all the listeners. And shalom.
Wow, Ben, you blew my mind.
Food for thought.
Very good, Malka. Excellent stuff. And Malka, I want to tell you that after you did the media diet, after you ate Prohibition Pickle, you got to burn it off. Best way to burn it off is to go on a great cycle tour. koshercycletours.com. They will bring you to the best places with the best bikes, with the best guides, and train you, teach you, show you, bring you, and thrall you all in kosher style. Not kosher style, kosher in style. Okay,
Nice.
Okay, and take you to beautiful places in the land of Israel, and also outside of the land, God's country. You know, people. I always tell people you go to Colorado. People are like, this is God's country. I'm like, yes, it is. It's Elohim country, okay? And Israel is Yud-Kei Vav-Kei country, right? It's the Tetragrammaton country. Okay,
Anyway,
we don't have
that's
time.
another show.
That's a more inside baseball, but it's important. In any case, koshercycletours.com, excellent place to get great kosher cycle touring. And if you're going to be in the land of Israel, don't forget to visit the folks at Hebron, the Jewish community of Hebron, and we are the Knights of the Machpelah. We defend the Tomb of the Patriarchs and Matriarchs. Come visit us, hebronfund.org/tour. And of course, if you want to get high in the land of Israel, okay, you got to go to the Temple Mount, because there's no higher place. That's highonthehar.com. Go there, get that spiritual suntan, connect with the Temple Mount.
But speaking of Leitzanut, it's not like a cute tourist site. It is not like a political, perspective tour, although that exists. If you're going to go on the Temple Mount, you must go according to halakha, according to Jewish law, according to the way of the sages. It is not a joke. It is not a tourist site. It is not fun, although you may enjoy yourself. It is a holy place, and there's very specific ways that you can go, and much more ways that you should not go, and just take it serious, people.
Malka, you are sharp today.
Thanks.
I got to tell you, you woke up like
I ate a big salad yesterday. I think that has something to do with it.
And you got up early morning to make cookies for the end of school.
I had to make cookies for the end of school next to last day.
You woke up early?
I woke up early.
And you
made
went
cookies.
That's right. And you started the dough last night. You got to go this morning.
I was momming it hardcore.
Yeah, you were Mesiris Nefesh Mom. M-O-M.
M-O-M.
Mesiris of Nefesh. Okay. That's very good, Malka. You're taking care of business. And you just talked about time in the beginning and the end. And great time pieces classics.
Yes.
And they're made
nice segue.
That's right. You can find them at retrowatchguy.com. Retro Watch Guy is I'm not just a promoter. I'm also a user of Retro Watch Guy's great services. They have great 60s and 70s watches that are a great present for your husband, son, grandpa, that kind of thing.
I'm sure they have ladies' watches too.
Not so much.
Or maybe you're
from
into
time
like
to time.
a nice masculine watch.
Yeah, those are cool. They're very cool. Maybe I don't know. RetroWatchGuy.com. I'll take a look. I haven't seen a lot of lady watches, but maybe they're there. Okay, maybe they're there. We'll check it out. We'll get information. The Retro Watch Guy people are making Aliyah to the land of Israel this
very
summer.
Happy. We got to get them on the show when they make Aliyah.
You bet we will.
I hope you guys are listening.
You bet. Of course they are listening. They're listeners. That's why they're also sponsors of the show. That's the way it works. I also want to shout out, somebody just knocked at the door beforehand, and she said to us, my mom listens to your show, so I want to do a shout out to Lori Lizer.
Hello, Lori.
Lori Lizer.
We got your daughter's beautiful cup that she made all by herself.
Good job, Lori, raising a good
nice
kid
lady that you did. Yiddish and Nachas.
That's right, Yiddish and Nachas. God bless you, Lori. Keep it up, and thanks so much for being part of the show. And I want to thank a lot of other people that are part of the show, and that is, first thing, Yocheved Seidman, Moshe Herman, Ben Bresky, Tabitha, and Lewin were live. That helps us, they help make the show actually get out to you, to your ears. So thank you to the team. Thank you to Krista and other supporters through the
Buy Me a Coffee.
BuyMeACoffee.com.
Thank you so much.
/Yishai. And if you get lost, you could just go to YishaiFleisher.com. And also, I think I got a donation recently from somebody who wanted to just support the works that we do at YishaiFleisher.com. So thank you very much. Malka, I have one more interview from the Knesset. I spoke with a legal expert about the issues of the judicial reform. And that is Yotam Eyal was at the Knesset, and I pulled him over to have a discussion a little bit about judicial reform and where it's going. So here's Yotam at the Knesset. All right, folks, Yishai Fleisher here. I'm in the Knesset today, Wednesdays. Try to be in the Knesset. I just sat with a group of American jurists just a few minutes ago, and this group of American jurists were all concerned about the proposed changes to the election committee of the Supreme Court. And what they were really concerned with was not how Israel is potentially changing its laws about the court. They were actually concerned with the perception of it and how they can defend Israel with their perception, also the media's perception of what's happening here. But it's obvious that they are not equipped with the facts. It's clear that they don't actually understand exactly what's going on, and that they are fed from the media, and there's just this negative perception, which is artificially and purposefully drawn in order to create a dark image for Israel, a negative image. The problem is they're not oriented and not armed with the facts. Yotam Eyal here at the Knesset is the CEO of the Legal Forum for Israel. The Legal Forum for Israel deals with exactly that, tries to make Israel more normal, more democratic, more in line with norms of how the legal system should look. And he's armed with the facts. He just came back from a tour of Canada, spoke in front of hundreds of people, and people are, in fact, desperate to understand a little bit better. And even I'm desperate to understand just a tad better what exactly are the proposed changes, what's the situation, and how do we indeed bring Israel in line with our wills to make a Jewish state that has liberal values still and continues to support the thriving of the Jewish state. Yotam, thank you so much for joining me here at the Knesset.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay, so if you were in the room with those three important jurists that I sat with just now, what would you have told them? They said, are you guys trying to, weaken the Supreme Court and create a situation in which you can override the Supreme Court or decide on which judges are going to sit in the Supreme Court in a different way that's an unfair way that leans more towards the elected government as opposed to a neutral Supreme Court?
So first of all, I will say, what is democracy? When we speaking about democracy, we need to understand that democracy is supposed to be a balance between the three branches of a government or governance. And in Israel, we have a problem. We have a problem that today the judicial system got too much power. They took a lot of power to himself from the other branches as the legislative, the Knesset, and the government. So what the reform trying to do is actually to balance it back to the place that the Knesset can imply their values and bring the Supreme Court into the place that is actually can correct the Knesset and the government and not overruled and taking the power from the government and the Knesset.
Okay, so you're saying that the Supreme Court's job is to criticize laws, but based on what? We don't have a constitution here, and one of the things that you have in the United States is a standing law, meaning to say, how does a case even get to the Supreme Court? It's got to go from a lower court to the appellate court. From the appellate court, maybe, if it's a constitutional case, and you write an appeal to the Supreme Court, the Supreme Court may and most likely will not take your case, and they'll just say, we referred back to the appeals court, or we don't want to judge on it, so the appeals court decision is final. Here in Israel, we don't have that. You have a Supreme Court that suddenly just decides that it wants to take a case. I don't even think you have to have a case in controversy. You don't have to have an aggrieved party. That's issue number one. Issue number two is you spoke in a general philosophical. Let's talk about, as we say, tachlis, a bottom line. What is being recommended right now? What is the discussion of the changes that could happen here in Israel if this government pushes forward?
Okay, so for the first point, what happened is that you mentioned that the Supreme Court got a lot of power between the years. So what happened is that, and you spoke about the standing right and about the ways that someone actually can go into the Supreme Court. So the way that the Supreme Court took power in between the years is combined from a few different parts. First of all, he gave himself the option to override the decision of the Knesset or the government by saying that something is unreasonable.
The reasonability clause.
Yes, unreasonableness. It's actually not reasonableness, it's more unreasonableness, because the idea is about that the Supreme Court doesn't need to give excuse why he say that something is not, the government decision is not good. He just can say that something it's unreasonable. And if it's unreasonable, that means that it doesn't need, every person have different reasonableness. Every person, if you ask the case for a person, he will say different answer about something if it's reasonable or not reasonable. And the judges took to himself a power to decide to say if we think by our values that something it's not reasonable, that means we can overrule the decision of the government. That's taking a power in one way. The other way was about overruled the Knesset decisions. First of all, it was in which way, the unreasonableness is in which way we can do it. Second is that we have the power to do it, because in Israel, as you mentioned, we don't have a constitution. So how we got even to the point that the Supreme Court can overrule decision of a Knesset? Because we don't have a constitution, so we don't have anything that says that it have this power. So the Supreme Court just gave to himself this thing. When in 1992, when we made a law called the Basic Law in Israel, Human Dignity Law. So he take it and made the interpretation that says that law giving me the rights to overrule all the other laws that there are in Israel. And from this point, he took the power to himself. The last one is who can apply to the court. Because usually when we are going to the court, we have certain cases. These cases, for example, if I got hurt from the government decision, let's say that the government decide to destroy my house and build a road. So I'm going to the court. I can ask the court to get some money for my house, maybe even to stop them from running my house if it's not coming from the right reasons. But what happened today that I don't need to be someone that's getting hurt from this decision. In Israel, every person can go to the Supreme Court and appeal on any subject. That means that if I don't like the decision of the government of the Knesset, I can go and apply to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court that I mentioned, he got the power to himself to decide in this question, and he got the ways to do it. He can overrule the decision just because he wants to, and not because there is a person that have a standing right.
Okay, so what are your suggestions right now? What are the moves to change some of this and to bring it back to norms?
So the main issue about in the judicial reform, as it was represented a few months ago, was about changing who appointing the judges in Israel. Right now in Israel, the judges appointing themselves into the role. I know it sounds crazy, but they are appointing themselves. In order to appoint someone to the Supreme Court, we have a committee of 9 members. 3 of them is Supreme Court judges, and in order to appoint someone, you need 7 voters. That means if the Supreme Court judges are voting together, and they always voting together, that means they have a veto right about who will go back in and get into the Supreme Court. But unfortunately, because of all the protests and because of what we had in Israel, today this is out of the table for now. I'm not saying it's not going to change, but for now. So what the government actually trying to do right now is to go for 2 things. First of all, is about the unreasonableness, as we mentioned, that is giving the court the option to override decision just by something amorphous that doesn't have actually any explanation about why you need to override the decision of the government. And the second one is about the government legal advisor. In Israel, the government legal advisor, and that sounds crazy, and every time when I'm speaking with someone and saying this issue, and he says how it can happen. In Israel, the government legal advisor can put a veto right on the government decision. He can tell to the government, you're not allowed to represent yourself in front of the court when someone appeals against you. That means when you're going to the Supreme Court, you have only 2 people in the Supreme Court in front of the judges. The first one is the guy that appeal against it. The second one is the government legal advisor that represents it against the government decision. So the government doesn't even get the basic thing that every person that's standing in front of the court have to have his own representative. So what I now suggest is to change it, that the government can take representative for himself. It's something that's supposed to be so basic that it's crazy that we actually fight about it right now in Israel, that every person in the world understands that every government need to have the option to represent herself in front of the court.
Okay. Last question for today. We're speaking with Yotam Eyal, who's the CEO of the Legal Forum. How much of the protests is really about the mechanics of legal reform? And how much is it about just bringing down the Netanyahu government against the general right wing, and this is just the issue that they found? What do you think the percentages were like? It's like really people are upset about the issues, or is the issues are really just a cover for a much broader societal rift?
I will split it to 2 parts. First of all, there is 10% of the people in the protest, this is the people behind the protest. This is the people that actually moving all these people out to go and to protest, and they're explaining them about these issues and why it's important to go and protest. The other 90% that you all saw in the streets, in the pictures, that going and demonstrating against the judicial reform, it's 90% of the people that doesn't even understand why they are there. They're just going by the 10%. So then this 90%, I think, just getting scared because they're afraid about things for Israel, for example, becoming a Jewish state that doesn't allow them to drive in the streets in Shabbat and things like this. And these things not actually on the table. It just things that the other 10% putting there. But the other the 10%, and this is the second part, and the most important part, this 10% doesn't even care about the judicial reform at all. All what they care is taking down Netanyahu. And how I can actually show it is that it's the same 10% people, it's the same people that was protesting in Netanyahu before the judicial reform was happened. They actually had meetings before the judicial reform was represented about how we can take people out and demonstrate. So they doesn't like the right control the state. And that's the only reason that they are out of the streets. Because eventually, when you look on the judicial reform, you can see that it's so logic. It's so logic, and this is what happened in every other country, like democratic Western country in the world. So why it's make people so scared? Because there is a mechanism with a lot of money that coming mostly from the New Israel Fund, from Europe countries, from people that doesn't want to see Israel as a Jewish state. And they putting this money with these people in the media and changing the mind of people and actually make them angry about issues, even it's not actually what's on the table.
Very good. Okay. Yotam Eyal, thank you so much for fighting for a just justice system here in the land of Israel at the Legal Forum for Israel. Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me.
Okay, thank you so much, Yotam. Great job explaining to us. And he's a real strong young Israeli who is out there. And it's amazing how the young people in Israel are involved in the system to try to better it. And there's so many issues, and there's so much love of this country. I feel it every single day.
We have a son who's almost 12.
Right.
And we had a discussion here on the show about how he wanted to read the news, and how I didn't really want him to be exposed to all the junk that they put in the news today. And that we ultimately decided on a couple very specific websites that he could get his news from. And I remember as a kid that my father used to yell at me because I'd never read the news. I never read the paper, never read the news. And he couldn't understand why I don't want to know what's going on. I grew up in Texas. Here in Israel, it's the kids are totally different. They all care about the news. They care about what's going on. They want to be active and involved in activism on behalf of good causes. And you were mentioning, I think last week on the show, you were mentioning that there was a beautiful group of, I think maybe you didn't mention on the show that there was a group here in our town in Judea who was running a camp for special needs kids.
Right.
Through the Ezra Youth Group. They were running a whole camp. It was all run by teenagers. And how involved in giving that these kids were. So some of the kids are politically involved, and some are involved in charitable works and acts of kindness. And kids being involved in building and giving is a big thing for Jewish kids.
It was a 5-day camp for mentally handicapped kids.
Right.
Run by local kids.
Which seems difficult.
I asked them seriously. I said, is this not difficult? And they're like, yeah. And then they're like, we have a few experts around this and that, but
That's
we're
amazing.
running this thing. And I'm telling you, these were some mentally challenged kids that were there. I saw them. And
kids with Down syndrome and
yeah.
Right.
And it was just I came back glowing. I came back I prayed with them the evening prayer. I came back like I was on the Temple Mount.
Wow.
I just came back so inside. I was
because it's very inspiring. It's very inspiring that these quote unquote regular kids would want to give of themselves like that.
Yeah, I cried. I really thought I was just like, this is beautiful. This is really beautiful. Okay, Malka, we are coming towards the end, but before we finish up, I just want to say that in America, they're in Parshat Chukat, which is the red heifer. Here in the land of Israel, we're going to be studying what I call the movie Torah portion of Balak, the famous wizard who came to curse the Jewish people and to undermine the story of the Jewish people. So just two quick thoughts for you. These are very deep thoughts and big thoughts, but we'll just do it very tight and short. And I want to give everybody here in the land of Israel a Torah thought, and outside of the land of Israel a different thought as well for what we see as last week's Parsha Torah portion. Just the red heifer is a mysterious rite and a mysterious law. But let's understand not the technicalities right now, but the premise. The premise of the red heifer is that there's a way, and a secret way, to defeat the energy of death. That is the point of it. Through the process of the red heifer, there's a way to sprinkle the ashes of the red heifer on the Jewish people and to thereby erase, remove the tum'ah, the energy of death that surrounds us. What's it called, Malka? There's a way of saying tum'ah in English.
Impurity.
Impurity. Impurity. It's not even an impurity. It's almost like an aura. All things are surrounded by life.
The bad mojo.
The bad mojo that brings you down to Chinatown. Okay, wants to take you down, and that is basically entropy. And the only way to defeat that is to have some kind of ability to connect to God, who's eternal, to rid yourself of this world's. They say only two things are eternal: death and taxes, that type of thing, right? But there's a truth to that. There's something about death which
not
is
eternal,
which is certain. For certain, right? You're right. That's right. There's only one thing that's eternal. That's God. But plugging yourself in and ridding yourself of the energy of death is the secret of the Jewish people. That's why for us the word netzach, which means victory, is also the same word as eternity. Okay, that's how we actually defeat you over time. Even if we're right now not doing everything right, over time, when you're connected to God through the ability to rid yourself of the impurity of death, and that is so much of Judaism, the Sabbath, the kosher laws, the hand-washing laws, the family purity laws, all of them have another goal, which is to avert the energy of death. The pinnacle of that, which we don't have today, is the red heifer, but it is a symbol of the ability to defeat death. And so I say to you right now, you want to connect to the eternal, you connect to the Jewish people. By the way, and this is what Ruth knew. Ruth knew that if I could connect now from Moab, I could connect myself to the Jewish people, I will have an eternal connection to God and to eternity. And Ruth indeed has that eternity, and King David is eternal. That comes from Ruth. My point is that the red heifer for all of you non-Jews out there is the Jewish people. To connect with the Jewish people is to...
Don't burn us.
No. That is your sprinkle. That is the sprinkle that you get by listening to this show, by learning the Torah, the Bible, by reading the Israel website and connecting to it. That is your red heifer. That is your ticket to connecting to the eternal and to the meaningful life of walking in the footsteps of God. So that's one thought I wanted to give.
That's nice. Of course, we still need the actual red heifer.
No.
And people need to know that there are like multiple people working on this as like their life work to locate, to breed, to bring to Israel, to like identify the red heifer. I think that there were only how many? 10 red. There's supposed to be only 10.
There was 9.
There was 9, and there's supposed to be in the end of days one last red heifer.
That's right. And there are people like, those hurricane chasers. They're red heifer chasers. Okay.
Right. And there are people who go to different farms around the world, especially in the southern United States, and they're like, I heard you have a red cow.
Right, and it's got to fulfill all kinds of requirements.
And there's very specific criteria for what constitutes the appropriate cow.
Okay, now for Balak, just very quickly, the Moabite king, who was actually a Midianite, but he became a Moabite ruler, sees that the Jewish people are coming to the land. He is threatened by them, and he hires an evil wizard whose name is Bil'am, which means Beloam, without a nation. He is nationless. He's all about himself. He is not part of a greater whole. He doesn't have a nation or a family or this and that.
He's a freelancer.
But he's a total freelancer. He's about himself. He's like a total freelancer. He doesn't have loyalties, fealties. He's about he's about the bottom line, and he can use his power and his perceived connection to God to do whatever. And he goes against the will of God. God lets him, but the donkey sees this angel of God before him. And he strikes the donkey 3 times. Finally, the donkey sees the angel clearly enough. Finally, the eyes of Bilam are revealed, and he...
What do you mean revealed?
Bilam, God lets him see the angel that's before him, and so basically, the donkey says to him, the donkey opens its mouth, and it says to him, "Have I not been your trusted donkey this whole time?" And he's like, had I had a sword with me, I would have killed you. And the donkey's like, basically the conversation can be read this way, which is, don't you have a sense of history? Don't you see the beginning and end of things? Don't you see the real will of God throughout time? Are you going to be the kind of people that try to curse the Jewish people? Don't you see that God wants them to survive and wants them to thrive and finally get to their destination? Like, which side of history are you on? The same thing with me. Like, don't you see that I've served you all this time? If something's happening, don't you question that and say, I trust you, my trusted steed? But before you go violent, don't you want to analyze the bigger picture? And what the evil king, Balak, does is the whole time he wants to take Bilam, the evil wizard, to a place where he'll only see the edge of the Jewish people, not the full story. The edge, and on the edge he will curse the Jewish people. That is the trick of Bilam and Balak. They want to show a tight little image, and on that image they want to curse the Jewish people. That's exactly what the media does. They'll take a small incident between a soldier and some Arab, and they will blow it up, and they will put their focus just on something to curse, and they don't see the big picture, the historical picture. They don't see what Bilam was finally forced to admit, how goodly Matovu Alecha Yaakov Israel Mishkanotecha Matov Olecha Yaakov Mishkanotecha Israel. How goodly are your tents, Jacob, your dwelling place is Israel. Right?
And it doesn't work. Also, it doesn't work to curse the edge of the Jewish people.
No, he doesn't. It doesn't quite work. Although he does find a way in the end to curse the Jewish people, and that is to get them to sin, and that is when evil is on, and when it tries to, if it's not able to do the big job, it strikes at us by
right, which is another way to say that it's really impossible to curse us from the outside. You can only curse us from the inside.
Right. There's a
like
truth
the only way for the Jewish people to be cursed is for us to curse ourselves.
That's right. And to fall, and we're not falling, Malka. We have a lot of pitfalls, but we're not falling. We are waking up and we are getting up. I want to thank you so much, Malka Fleisher, for joining me today on the show.
Yes, thank you.
I want to thank all the folks that made the show possible, including our guest, our interviewees, and also Ben Bresky and Rabbi Shimshon Nadel, our resident priests, our Kohanim, bringing great radio and sound to the show. I want to thank you all out there, wherever you are. I want to send you a big blessing from the good land, from the land of Israel. We shall overcome because God is with us. We are plugged into the eternal. We're not going to see just the small picture. We're going to see the big picture. We're going to be plugged into that big picture, and we're not going to allow ourselves to be small-minded in this generation of greatest opportunity and greatest ability to contribute to God's dream. We are part of the big picture, and so we're going to snap out of it, dust ourselves off, not let the little things get us down, and see the big picture and continue to push forward with God's great project and do our job in our generations.
Amen.
Lots of love and lots of blessings from the land of blessings. God bless you all, and Shabbat Shalom. Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.